The first thing I ever noticed about her was that she didn't try to be noticed. That should have told me something. In our world, the ones who are dangerous are almost never loud. She came off the resupply bird at Fob Redoubt on a gray morning with the wind coming sideways off the pan, carrying her own kit like it weighed nothing, which meant either she'd packed light or she was stronger than she looked. I put my money on light. We all did. You get a sense after enough deployments of who's arriving to fight and who's arriving to fill a square, and everything about her red square filler. Plain kit. No unit swagger. No hard boy sunglasses. She had a clipboard slung under one arm on a bungee cord, and a name tape that just said Cole, and when Sergeant Doyle looked at the manifest and read out, Route Clearance Augmentee, Trainee, she didn't correct him. She just nodded like that was exactly right and asked where she should stage her bags. Trainee, Doyle said to nobody, the way you'd say weather. He was our platoon sergeant, 11 years in, a slab of a man with a voice built for correcting the young. They're sending us interns now. Somebody laughed. It might have been me. I'm not proud of that, so I'll say it plain. It was me and a couple of the other guys, and she heard it and she didn't flinch. And I took her not flinching for not understanding rather than for what it was, which was a person who had stopped needing our approval a long time before she ever met us. Redoubt was a bad little outpost at the edge of a bad little valley, a horseshoe of Hesco and sandbag pushed up against the desert where the frontier folded in on itself. Beyond the wire, the ground ran flat and pale for a couple of kilometers and then broke into the Harrow, a cratered ribbon of road that snaked down through the wadi and into the town of Sabin, where the map stopped being reliable and the war stopped following any rules we'd been taught. We'd been running that road for 6 weeks. We'd lost a truck to it 3 weeks back, and 2 good men with the truck, and every man in the platoon carried the memory of that morning the way you carry a stone in your boot, not fatal, but felt with every step. So when they sent us a trainee instead of a full route clearance package, it landed as an insult. Not to her, to us. As if command had done the arithmetic on Redoubt and decided we weren't worth the real thing. She'll shadow, the lieutenant said at the morning brief, and you could hear in his voice that he was as unimpressed as the rest of us and trying to be professional about it. Corporal Marsh, keep an eye on her. Make sure she doesn't wander into anything. That was me, the babysitter. I remember the flush of it, the small, ugly pleasure of being handed authority over the one person on the base who ranked lower than my mood. I found her at the water point, filling jerry cans, and I told her the platoon needed the sump dug behind the aid station, and she looked at me for a second, a level, unhurried look, gray eyes, no heat in them at all, and then she picked up the entrenching tool and went and dug the sump. Didn't argue. Didn't ask why the augmentee was doing pioneer labor, just dug. I watched her do it for a while, waiting for the complaint, the sigh, the thing that would let me be right about her. It never came. She dug a clean sump, squared the walls, tamped the spoil, and when she was done she cleaned the tool and set it back on the rack the way it's supposed to go, blade down, handle up, and I thought, okay, at least she's tidy. That's the most generous thing I let myself think about her that first day. At least she's tidy. We called her clipboard, not to her face at first and then to her face because she never gave us a reason to stop, and men in a hard place will take silence as permission. Clipboard, get the water. Clipboard, you're on burn detail. Clipboard, stay behind Marsh and don't touch anything with a wire on it. She took all of it the same way, a nod, a level look, the work done right. And the thing I understand now that I could not see then is that she was reading us the entire time. Not the road yet. Us. Figuring out exactly how much we knew and exactly how much we didn't, so that when the moment came she'd know which of us to trust with which piece of our own lives. I didn't know any of that on the gray morning. On the gray morning she was just the trainee, and I was just a tired corporal glad to have someone beneath me, and the Harrow Road sat out past the wire in the wind, patient as a snake, waiting for all of us. The brief for the Sabin run came down 2 days later, and it was a bad one. We had a district medical team that needed to reach the clinic on the far side of the town, the kind of mission that looks small on a slide and gets men killed in real life, because it meant taking the harrow all the way through the wadi and into Sabin proper, past every choke point on the route, on a timeline we didn't set. The lieutenant laid it out in the plywood ops shack with a laser pointer and a printed overhead, and the red got thicker the deeper into the map he went. 3 known IED strikes on that stretch in the last month. Command wire in the wadi, a stretch by the old canal bridge where the road necked down to a single lane between a wall and a drop, and you couldn't turn a truck around if your life depended on it, which it would. Route clearance was supposed to lead, the lieutenant said. We've got coal. He didn't say it cruel. He said it the way you report a shortfall in ammunition. So we go slow, we go careful, and everybody watches the ground. I was watching Cole instead. She'd come into the shack quiet and taken a spot at the back, clipboard down, and while the rest of us looked at the red marks on the map, she was looking at the photograph. The actual overhead imagery, the gray and tan pixels of the harrow and the wadi and the neck-down bridge. She was looking at it the way I look at a woman across a bar, or the way Doyle looks at a plate of hot food, like it was the only thing in the room. And once, just once, she tilted her head, the way you do when something's off in a song, and her eyes went to a spot on the road past the bridge, a flat, innocent stretch of tan with nothing on it, and stayed there. Something, the lieutenant asked, not because he expected anything, because she'd tilted her head and he was thorough. Maybe, she said, first word I'd heard her volunteer in 2 days. The road past the bridge, the spoil pattern's wrong. The what? The dirt. She didn't come forward, didn't make a thing of it. Somebody moved dirt there and put it back. You can see it in the shadow, and there's no reason to dig on a road unless you're putting something in it or taking something out. A pause. Or unless you want us looking at the dirt while the real one's somewhere we're not looking. Shack was quiet for a second. Then Doyle laughed a short, dismissive bark and said, "It's a road. People dig on roads, it's called a pothole." And the tension broke and half the platoon smiled, and the moment passed and the lieutenant moved his laser to the timeline, and I watched Cole's face while they laughed at her, and there was nothing on it at all. Not hurt. Not anger. She'd said her piece. She'd logged somewhere behind those gray eyes that we hadn't listened, and she went back to looking at the photograph. I want to tell you I defended her. I didn't. I laughed with Doyle because Doyle was my sergeant and Cole was clipboard, and in the arithmetic of that room the trainee was worth less than the joke. I'll carry that. It's a small thing next to what came after, but I'll carry it because it was the first time she was right and we were wrong, and it cost us nothing yet, and that's the only kind of being wrong that's free. We rolled at first light. The harrow in the morning is a beautiful thing if you can forget what it is, the sun coming up flat and gold across the pan, the road a pale seam through it, the wadi still holding blue shadow in its low places. We went in a column, my truck third, the medical team's vehicle boxed in the middle where we could bleed for it, and Cole in the back of the second truck with her clipboard and a kit bag she guarded closer than she guarded anything else. I'd clocked that bag. Everybody travels with a ready bag, but hers she kept a hand on, always, the way you'd keep a hand on a child in a crowd. We made the wadi without trouble, and that itself was the trouble. The harrow never gave you the wadi for free. Doyle was up in the lead truck on the radio, calling the pace, and I could hear in his voice that the ease of it was making him tight rather than loose, and that was the one thing I respected about Doyle. He was a bully, but he wasn't a fool, and a quiet road frightened him the way it should. We came up out of the wadi toward the neck-down bridge, and Cole's voice came over the platoon net, level and unhurried, the first time I'd heard it on the radio. "Lead, this is Cole, stop the column." Doyle keyed back, "Reason." "The verge on the right, 30 meters short of the bridge, stop the column." Doyle didn't stop the column. I want to be fair to him. We were exposed there, halfway up out of the wadi, a bad place to sit, and every instinct a leader has screams don't stop in the open, and a trainee telling you to halt your platoon on a threat road on a hunch about a verge is not, in the moment, an easy thing to obey. He slowed. He didn't stop. He said, "Talk to me while we move," and the column crept forward, and I watched the right verge come up in my window. A low shoulder of tan gravel, nothing on it, nothing at all. "Stop," Cole said, and this time there was something underneath the level in her voice. A thing I'd never heard from her, and it wasn't fear, it was certainty, and the certainty was worse than fear. "Doyle, stop the trucks. Now." And Doyle, God bless the fear in him, stopped the trucks. For a second there was nothing. Just the engines idling and the wind and my own pulse in my ears. And I thought, here it is. Here's where the trainee cost us our tempo on a road we can't sit on. And I actually opened my mouth to say something to that effect. And then Cole was out of the second truck, out before anyone told her she could be, moving low and fast to the right verge with her kit bag in her hand. And she crouched at the shoulder 30 meters short of the bridge, exactly where she'd called. And she looked at the ground the way she'd looked at the photograph. And she went very still. "Command wire," she said over the net, calm as a man reading a menu. "Buried, running from the verge to the bridge abutment. If we'd rolled the lead truck onto the bridge, somebody in that tree line was going to close the circuit." A pause. "There's a trigger, man. Everybody stay in your trucks and give me the gun on the tree line. I need 3 minutes." Nobody laughed at her that time. I sat in my truck with my rifle up on the tree line she'd named, and I watched Clipboard, the trainee, the intern, kneel on a threat road and do something with her hands that I could not see and did not understand, slow and sure, while the whole platoon held its breath around her. And somewhere in the back of my head, a small cold voice that I'd been ignoring for 3 days finally made itself heard. And what it said was, "You have no idea who this is." She was right about the dirt past the bridge, too. But we didn't learn that until later, and by then the learning was a different kind. Camp that night was quiet in a way our camps were usually not. We'd made Sabin, delivered the medical team, held the clinic through the afternoon, and pulled back to a patrol base on the near edge of town as the light went. A walled compound we'd used before, safe as anything was out there. The men should have been loud. We'd taken the Harrow and come out the far side with all our trucks and all our people, which after 6 weeks of that road was a thing worth being loud about. But they weren't loud. They were quiet, and they were quiet around Cole, and I understood the quiet because I felt it myself. It's the quiet of men rearranging what they thought they knew. She sat apart, the way she always did, cleaning her gear by the light of a chemstick, and I watched the platoon not look at her the way you not look at something you're afraid of. Nobody called her Clipboard that night. It was old Master Sergeant Bran who broke it, and the way he broke it told me more than anything she'd done on the road. Bran was the oldest man on the base by a decade, a route clearance lifer who'd been pulled back to Redoubt to run the maintenance bay because his knees were done, and the desert had used him up. He'd been on the far side of the wire when we rolled out, and he was there when we rolled back. And he came out to the compound that night with a limp and a canteen cup of coffee. And he walked the length of the patrol base slow. And he stopped in front of Cole where she sat cleaning her gear. And he looked down at her for a long moment. And then Master Sergeant Bran, who did not stand for lieutenants and had once, famously, remained seated when a general walked into his bay, straightened up off his ruined knees and came to attention. He didn't salute. You don't salute in the field. It marks the officers for a sniper, and Bran had buried men who'd learned that the hard way. But he came to attention, this old broken lifer in front of the trainee, and he said one word. "Serpent." Cole looked up at him. Something moved across her face that I hadn't seen there before, not pride, nothing so cheap as pride. Something more like being recognized after a long time of not wanting to be. "Bran," she said, "you're supposed to be retired." "They keep finding reasons." He eased himself down to sit beside her, the way you sit beside a person you've bled next to. "Didn't know they'd sent you up here. They had you on the manifest as a trainee." "They had me on the manifest as whatever gets me on the bird," she said. "I asked for quiet. Redoubt looked quiet." Bran laughed, a dry crack of a thing, and shook his head and looked out at the platoon, at all of us. sitting in our quiet, watching this without understanding it. And then he looked back at her, and what he said next he said loud enough for us to hear, and I have thought about it every day since. "Quiet," he said. "You picked the Harrow Road for quiet." He shook his head again. "Girl, these boys have been running that road for 6 weeks thinking it was theirs. You walked it once and read it like a book they can't even open." He took a pull of his coffee. "They've been calling you clipboard, I hear." She didn't answer that. She went back to her gear. But I answered it inside where it counted. I sat in the dark of that compound and I put it together, the way Bran had come to attention, the name he'd used, the record it implied, the 6 weeks we'd spent bleeding on a road she'd read in a single morning, and the small, cold voice in the back of my head stopped being small. Desert Serpent. I'd heard the name. Everyone on that side of the theater had heard the name. The way you hear the name of a river you've never seen. The render-safe operator who'd worked the worst corridors in the province, who had a number attached to her that people said couldn't be real, who was supposed to be a legend the same way a good ghost story is a legend, a thing that made the bad road a little less lonely to talk about. And we had made her dig our sump. I didn't sleep much that night. None of us who'd laughed did, I think. We lay in the dark of Sabin with the memory of the command wire in the verge, 30 meters short of a bridge that would have opened up under our lead truck, and we did the arithmetic that Bran had done out loud, and every one of us arrived at the same number, and the number was this. The trainee we'd mocked for 3 days was the only reason we were alive to mock her. The Harrow had one more thing to teach us. It always did. And it taught us the next morning on the way home, in the neck-down stretch by the canal, where the road ran single-lane between a wall and a drop, and there was nowhere in the world to go. We rolled at first light again, and the mood in the trucks was different, and the difference had a name none of us said out loud. The plan was to retrace the Harrow back to Redoubt, same road, reverse order, my truck now third from the rear, the medical vehicle boxed again in the middle. Cole rode in the second truck from the front, where route clearance rides, and nobody argued about where she should sit anymore. The joke had gone out of us. She checked her kit bag before we rolled, that same close hand on it, and when Doyle called the pace over the net his voice had a new thing in it when he said her name. He said Cole, and it didn't sound like clipboard anymore. It sounded like a man saying the name of the one tool in his box he couldn't afford to break. We made the town edge and dropped into the built-up stretch where the Harrow squeezed between the old compound walls, and then we came to the canal, and the canal was where the road tried to kill us. The neck-down section ran maybe 200 meters, a single lane pinned between a mud-brick wall on the left, high and blind, and on the right a drop into the dry canal cut, 4 meters of crumbling bank down to a bed of broken concrete and rusted rebar. You could not turn around in it. You could not go off-road in it. If the front of the column stopped, the whole column stopped, strung out along that channel like beads on a wire, and every man in every truck knew it, and the knowing sat in the cab with us like a fourth passenger. Cole's voice came over the net before the lead truck was 50 meters in. "Lead Cole, hold at the mouth. Don't commit the column." Doyle held, he didn't even ask why this time. "Talk." "The channel's wrong." A pause, and I could picture her in the second truck, head tilted, reading the ground through the windscreen the way she'd read the photograph in the shack. "Somebody's been working in here. There's fresh disturbance at the far end by the culvert, and there's," the pause again longer, and then the certainty in her voice went down a register into something flat and absolute. "There's a chain. This isn't one device. It's a set. They built a killing channel and they want us in it before they close it." "How do you know?" "Because it's what I'd do," she said, "if I wanted to kill a whole platoon at once. And they've had 6 weeks to watch you run this road and learn how you move. A beat. Everybody stays put. I'm dismounting. Marsh." And it was the first time she'd used my name, and I sat up straight in the cab like a struck man. "You've got sharp eyes, and you did me the courtesy of watching me dig a sump. Come up on foot behind me, 10 meters back, and be my second set of eyes. Don't touch anything. Just see what I point at." I don't know why I went. Fear should have kept me in the truck. But there is a thing that happens when a person who has earned it asks you to do a hard thing. It lifts you past your own fear on the strength of theirs being absent. And Cole's fear was so completely absent that I dismounted into that killing channel and moved up behind her because she asked me to, and I would do it again. Up close, the work was nothing like I'd imagined. I thought EOD was wire cutting, the red wire, blue wire of the movies, a held breath and a snip. It was nothing like that. It was slow. It was so slow it hurt to watch. Cole moved up the channel at a crawl, reading the ground foot by foot, and she narrated it under her breath, half to me and half to herself. And what I heard in those 200 meters taught me more about her than 3 days of watching her dig had. See the wall base there, the mortar's been scraped. Someone knelt there. Long time, both knees. She pointed with an open hand, never a finger, never touching. That's the trigger man's hide, or was. He's gone now, moved when he saw us hold. That tells me the initiator's not command wire on this one. It's victim-operated, or a remote he doesn't need line of sight for. So I can't clear this by finding one man. Her voice stayed level, always level. I have to find every device, and I have to assume there's one I'll miss, and I have to work like the one I'll miss is the one under my own feet. That's the job. She found the first one 40 meters in. I never saw it. That's the thing I want you to understand. I was 10 meters back with sharp eyes and a lifetime of looking at that kind of ground, and I never saw it, and she crouched over a patch of road that looked exactly like all the other road and said, "Here," and went to work. She opened the guarded kit bag then, and it wasn't full of the things I'd imagined. It was full of the plainest tools I'd ever seen. A hook and line. A pull kit. Sapper's picks worn smooth. A little brush, like an artist's brush. She didn't use a robot and she didn't call for one, and later Brand told me why. The channel was too tight for the bot, and the far device by the culvert was rigged to a collapse charge in the wall that would bury the whole lane, medical truck, and all, if the column sat too long. So she'd done the arithmetic the way she always did, and decided that the fastest safe way out for 40 men was her own 2 hands, and she decided it in about 4 seconds, and she'd never once said the words out loud, because saying them would have cost time and she had none to spend. She worked that first device for 11 minutes. I counted. 11 minutes on her knees on a threat road, her hands moving slow and exact, brushing spoil away a gram at a time, tracing the wire back with the hook and the line, her breathing even, her face empty of everything except the ground in front of her. And 40 meters back, a truck full of medical supplies and a boxed-in platoon sat and watched her back and did not make a sound. Then the tree line across the canal opened up on us. I heard the first burst crack past overhead, and I went flat in the channel and brought my rifle up, and the platoon guns answered from the trucks, and the whole world turned to noise, and in the middle of the noise, Cole did not move. She did not go flat. She did not so much as flinch her hands off the device she was rendering safe. She knelt in the open in a firefight with her hands inside a live IED, and she finished the pull the way you'd finish a sentence. And only when the device was safe did she look up and call, over the net, in the exact same level voice she'd used to talk about the mortar on the wall. "That's one, keep them off me and I'll walk us out." I have been shot at many times. I have never in my life seen anything like a person who could keep her hands slow while the air came apart around her. That is not courage the way we usually mean it. Courage is doing the thing while afraid. This was something past that, a discipline so total that the fear simply had nowhere to land. She'd been afraid, maybe, somewhere years back, and she'd worn it down the way the desert wears down stone, until what was left was just the work and the hands and the level voice. And the rounds could crack all they wanted and they weren't part of the job, so she didn't let them in. The second device was the one that would have killed the responders. She found it 8 meters up from the first, and this is the part I have told exactly twice, to men who needed to understand what she was, because it is the part that says it best. It wasn't laid to kill the column. It was laid to kill the men who came to help. A secondary, set off to the side of the first, positioned so that when a truck struck the primary and men bilayed out and rushed forward to pull their wounded clear, they'd bunch up right on top of it. It's a thing evil men do, and it works, and it had worked on that road before, and Cole knelt over it and read it and understood in a second the whole cold intention of it. And her voice when she called it in was the only time in the whole channel that something came into it, not fear, not rage, but a flat, hard contempt, one professional's judgment on another's cruelty. Secondary here, command set to catch the rescue, a pause. Nobody rushes forward for anybody in this channel. If a man goes down, you call it and you hold and you let me come to you. Do you understand me? You hold. A beat and then quiet almost to herself. Not on my road. She rendered it safe in 9 minutes with rounds still coming across the canal. And when she stood up from it, Corporal Reyes was down in the third truck with a wound through the shoulder. And every instinct in that platoon screamed to rush him. And not one man moved, because she had told them to hold and they held. And by holding they lived, because the ground between them and Reyes had 2 more devices in it that she hadn't cleared yet. And if they'd run to their friend, the way men do, they'd have run onto the very thing built to catch them doing it. She cleared the path to raise herself, foot by foot on her knees in the open under fire, and when she reached him she checked the ground around him before she checked the wound, and only when the ground was safe did she wave the medic forward down the lane she'd cleared, and she stayed crouched over Reyes with her body between him and the tree line the whole time the medic worked, and I heard her say something to him low, and Reyes told me later what it was. She'd said, "You're on a cleared patch now. Safest ground on this road. I checked it myself." And Reyes, who was 19 and bleeding and had called her clipboard on the burn detail 2 days before, said it was the calmest he'd felt the whole deployment, lying wounded in a killing channel, because Desert Serpent had told him the ground was safe, and he believed her the way you believe the sunrise. There were 2 more devices, and then there was the culvert, and the culvert was where the road made its last try for us. The far end of the channel ran under a low culvert where the canal passed beneath the road, and the fresh disturbance she'd clocked from 200 meters out was there, and it was the worst of them. The collapse charge Bran had warned about, wired to bring the mud brick wall down across the single lane and bury whatever sat beneath it. But it wasn't only that. As she worked toward it, a vehicle came out of the town behind us, fast, engine screaming, and every man in that platoon knew what a vehicle coming fast at a pinned column meant, and the guns swung to it, and it kept coming. VBIED, Doyle called tight. Truck closing 600 meters, guns put it down. And here is the last thing she taught us, and it is the thing I understand least and admire most. We'd have shot the truck. We'd have hammered it with everything we had and hoped to stop it before it reached us, and maybe we would have and maybe we wouldn't, and either way we'd have been reacting, afraid, throwing lead at a problem. Cole didn't do that. Cole looked at the truck for 1 second, and she keyed the net and she said, "That's not a bomb, that's a spectator. He's coming to watch the wall come down and film it. Hold your fire. If you shoot him, you'll shoot a farmer and hand them the picture they want." A beat. The threat's not the truck. The threat's the wall, and the wall's on a timer, not a trigger, because they expected you to be dead in this channel by now and they didn't want to stay to set it off. Which means, and here she was already moving, fast now, faster than I'd seen her move, up the last 30 meters to the culvert. I've got maybe 4 minutes, and I'm going to spend them on the wall, not the truck, and I need every one of you to trust that I read this right. She read it right. The truck was a farmer's truck. It stopped at 400 meters, and a man got out with a phone, and he was exactly the spectator she'd named, come to film the deaths of 40 men for the propaganda of it, and if we'd shot him, we'd have made their film for them. And the wall was on a timer, a crude mechanical thing counting down to bury the lane, and Cole reached the collapse charge with somewhere under 2 minutes on it, and she knelt in the culvert's mouth, and she did the slowest, surest work of the whole morning with the clock running down inside the wall, and she cut the initiator out of it with maybe 40 seconds to spare, and she held the dead timer up over her head so the whole strung-out column could see it. And then she set it down in the dirt very gently, the way you'd set down something that had tried to kill you and failed, and she stood up in the mouth of the culvert, and she was, for 1 second, exactly what Bran had come to attention for. Then she keyed the net and said, "Channel's clear. Walk them out slow. I'll lead on foot." And she led us out of the killing ground the way she'd let us in, on foot, at a crawl, watching the road, and 40 men and a wounded corporal, and a medical team came out the far side of the harrow alive because the trainee we'd mocked had read the road like a book we couldn't open. The silence, when we cleared the channel and the trucks pulled up onto safe ground beyond it, was the loudest thing I ever heard. Nobody cheered. You'd think men would cheer, coming out of a thing like that alive, but they didn't, and the not cheering was its own kind of tribute. The platoon dismounted onto the safe ground and they stood there in the dust, and the diesel stink, and they looked at her, clipboard, the trainee, the intern, Desert Serpent, walking back down the line to check on Rays, her kit bag in her hand, her face empty of everything except the next thing that needed doing. And one by one they went quiet as she passed, the way a room goes quiet when someone who's earned it walks in. It was Doyle who did the thing that broke me. Doyle, 11 years in, the man who'd called her intern in the ops shack, who'd laughed at the spoil pattern, who'd named her clipboard first and loudest. Doyle walked up to her on the safe ground and stopped in front of her, and he was a big man and she was not. And he looked down at her for a long moment with something working in his face that I'd never seen on Doyle, because Doyle did not do humility. Doyle did not do anything soft. And then Sergeant Doyle took off his patrol cap. He took it off, in the field, in the dust, and he held it against his chest, and he said, loud enough for every man to hear, in a voice that cracked once and didn't try to hide it. "I called you a trainee." He swallowed. "I've been running that road 6 weeks and I called you a trainee, and you walked my whole platoon out of a channel I'd have buried us all in. And I don't," he stopped and started again, "I don't have the words for it, so I'm just going to say I'm sorry, and I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to say it in front of every man you saved." And Cole looked at him, that level, unhurried, gray-eyed look, the same one she'd given me at the water point when I sent her to dig, and there was no triumph in it. No vindication, nothing that took the smallest pleasure in his lowered head. There was only a kind of tired kindness, the kindness of someone who has watched a great many men learn this lesson and has never once enjoyed the teaching of it. "You stopped the trucks when I told you to," she said. "Twice. Second time on a hunch about a verge on a road you couldn't sit on with a trainee's voice in your ear." She let that land. "A lot of men wouldn't have. Those men are why I read the road, and it doesn't matter because they don't stop when I call it." She put her cap back on for him, reached up and settled it on his head, a small human thing that undid the last of us. "You stopped. That's why you're all alive. So don't take your hat off to me, Sergeant." We walked out together. I have thought about that for a long time, that she gave him back his dignity in the same breath he'd surrendered it. She could have had her moment. God knows she'd earned it, and God knows we'd have stood there and taken it, every man of us with his head down. But she didn't want the moment. She wanted the platoon to stop next time when the next voice on the net called a halt on a hunch. She was already thinking about the next road, the next set of men who'd have to trust a warning they didn't understand, and she spent her one earned moment of triumph buying that trust forward instead of spending it on herself. That is a thing I did not have the character to understand at the water point, and I am not sure I have the character to do it now. But I saw her do it, and I have tried. We got back to Redoubt in the failing light, and Bran was at the wire when we rolled in, and he saw it on us, the thing that had happened out on the harrow, before a single man said a word. He looked at the trucks all present, and the medical team all present, and Rays walking wounded but walking, and he looked at Cole climbing down from the second truck with her guarded bag, and old Master Sergeant Bran, who had once stayed seated for a general, came to attention again, at the wire, in front of the whole returning platoon, and this time every man on that base came to attention with him. Nobody ordered it. It just happened the way the tide comes in. 40 men who'd called her clipboard 3 days before, standing at attention in the dust of redoubt as the trainee walked in from the road she'd cleared, and she stopped when she saw it, and something moved across her face at last. Not pride, never pride, but something that looked like the closest thing to peace I ever saw on her. The look of a person who has spent a very long time not being seen finally letting herself be seen, just for a second, just once, before she put it away and went to check on her wounded. I never called her clipboard again. None of us did. And when new men rotated into redoubt in the weeks after, green and loud and sure of themselves the way we'd been sure, and they saw the quiet woman with the plain kit and the guarded bag and started, inevitably, to size her up the way men size up anyone who doesn't perform their own importance. One of the old platoon would take that new man aside, quiet, and tell him about the harrow, and the canal, and the channel, and the wall with 40 seconds on it. And I noticed that when she walked into the chow tent after that, the room would go quiet, the way a room goes quiet for the people who have earned it, and the new men would learn it fast. You don't need to be told twice who Desert Serpent is. You just watch the room stand a little straighter when she walks in, and you stand straighter too, and later you find out why, and you're grateful you learned it the easy way. She'd asked for quiet, Brand said, and picked the Harrow Road to find it. She never found the quiet, but she gave it to 40 men who'd have died in a channel without her, and she never once asked us to be sorry for the days we spent calling her a trainee. She just walked the road and read it like a book we couldn't open and walked us home. That was the last thing she taught me, and it's the one I've kept. The loudest people on any base are almost never the dangerous ones. The dangerous ones are quiet, and they carry their own bags, and they dig your sump without complaint while they figure out exactly how much you don't know. So that when the road finally tries to kill you, the person you mocked is the one kneeling in the open with her hands slow and her voice level, walking you out of the killing ground, one careful foot at a time. We called her clipboard. Her call sign was Desert Serpent, and she silenced a platoon that had laughed at her, not with a word but with her hands. And I have stood at attention for her in the dust of a bad little outpost at the edge of a bad little war, and I would do it again, and again, and again.